Welcome to the Jewish Road Podcast. My name is Matt Davis.
And I'm Ron Davis.
We help Christians make sense of the roots of their faith.
And we help the Jewish community make sense of Jesus.
Thanks for joining us.
Every tribe, every tongue, Emmanuel, your king shall come. End of sorrows, end of pain. Come and praise Creator's name.
Hey, welcome to the Jewish Road Podcast. My name is Matt Davis, and look at this. Who am I here with?
Right next to me.
That's right. And there you go, you gotta get that. We are very excited because today we have not just you. We don't have to actually just sit here and talk to each other this time.
Yeah. That's right. Now I won't get so many remarks out of you.
Yeah, we actually have a friend. We need like a diffuser. We need somebody in the middle of us to just kind of help a little bit. So
thank God.
Yeah, that's good. So we have a friend of ours, and her name is Heather Quiroz. And Heather, we're so excited to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from.
Sure. Yeah. So I am currently living in the great state of Iowa. Actually was born and raised in Illinois, but I entered the promised land not long ago into the great state of Iowa.
Is that the promised land? We missed that.
When you leave Illinois, it is for sure.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yes, it's a land flowing with corn and barbecued pork, I think, is probably where I was at, which actually would not be good for a Jewish person, but I'm a Gentile. So there you have it. But
there you go.
But yeah, I live here with my husband and our daughter, and I love Jesus and trying to understand him from within his Jewish context, and serve in youth ministry as a volunteer at my church. And I have a ministry that I founded that we're going to be talking about today. I also love basketball officiating. I'm really big into that. So I do that kind of as a fun thing on the side.
That's good. Yep. So you were introduced to us through a friend, Marco Stryker. And when we were talking about sharing with him some of the stuff that we're doing, he said, "Oh, you have to talk to this friend of mine and got to talk to Heather." And so basically he said, she wrote a book. She has a ministry. It's called First Century Youth Ministry. And immediately I perked up and I said, "What? Who is this person? I must talk to her." So you're not Jewish. You are a Gentile. What is a Gentile doing with a ministry called First Century Youth Ministry? And how did all of this begin for you?
Yeah, for sure. So back in 2010, I met a good friend of mine who at the time had just graduated from the University of Nevada. She is a 6 foot tall and was a former basketball player from the University of Nevada. And she had just gotten back from this life-changing discipleship experience in Israel where she went with Athletes in Action. So she played basketball during the day she played basketball in the evenings, and then during the day hiked all around the land of Israel, walking the land as if she were a first century disciple following a rabbi. And and at the time she gave me the nickname Dougie because my maiden name is Douglas. And that was fun to go from Douglas to Quiroz, which no one knows how to properly say. I was in the airport one time and I was boarding the plane, and this woman says to me, "Mrs. Queer Toes, have a nice flight." I'm like, "Where's the T? There's no T in my name." So, but anywho, my friend, she told me all about this trip, and she said, "Doug, you got to go. I'm going back next year. You got to go with me." I said, "Jess, look, I'm not a college basketball player." She said, "Heather, the women's level of skill level in Israel is like at a freshman high school level." I was like, "Okay, I can hang with
we
that."
Jews are not really the Jewish people are not really known for our basketball prowess or skill.
Not so much. No, and it showed, and that's okay. But
we're
the
good
pita
at
and hummus, and the falafel was.
I had a little story about my freshman year in high school basketball, and I wasn't quite as tall as everybody, and the coach used to call me Bad News. And you remember Bad News Barnes? You know, he was a great basketball player, and all my other teammates said, "Why do you call him Bad News?" You know, it was like a compliment. And he said, "Well, he's bad news for our team."
Ooh,
Oh.
eek. That's not the compliment anybody wants to hear. And then
Yeah.
you were like, I
Yeah,
think I'll
that's okay.
do something else sophomore year, right? But yeah, so she convinced me to go on the trip, and I walked the land of Israel as if I were a first century disciple, following a rabbi for 3.5 weeks. I played
Okay,
basketball during the day. Yeah.
can you unpack that? What does that actually mean to walk around Israel like a first century disciple? Did you not use a
Yes.
bus? Were you only
So,
eating raw fish that you caught out of the Sea of Galilee? Like, what does that actually mean to walk around
sure.
like a first century disciple?
Yeah. So we studied the Bible from within its cultural and historical context. We walked to certain biblical sites and had these faith lessons that taught us the topography, the geography of the Bible, and kind of intertwined all of that historical history and cultural context and helped us really see um, with greater clarity what Jesus would have been communicating to his disciples, and then therefore what discipleship would have looked like following a rabbi, walking around. Because you know this, right? That rabbis are itinerant teachers who take their students outside the classroom on hillsides and in valleys and other places, teaching them because the land is part of the lesson, right? We see
That's
that
right.
with Jesus all the time. Is that
It's the
he's
fifth gospel.
constantly using, yeah, the fifth gospel. Exactly. Yes. St. Jerome says that, right? That the land of
Yeah.
Israel is like the fifth gospel. And so that's what we were experiencing was the fifth gospel, the land of Israel, helping us see who Jesus is and was with greater clarity. And so it radically changed my life. I remember sitting on a couch in Bethlehem shortly after our trip had begun, and I thought, wow, why haven't I learned these things before? But I was so steeped in westernized Christian thinking that I had never even considered that knowing the Bible from within its Near Eastern context helped all of Scripture make more sense and come to life. And so when I finished up that journey and I got back on the plane and headed back to the United States, I just was so hungry to know more. I gobbled up as much as I could. I gobbled up that reading list. I watched and listened to as many Ray Vander Laan things as I could think of and find. And then a crisis hit in my life where I entered into this kind of a dark season, but a season of rest and healing with the Lord, where I was leading a youth ministry for almost a decade, and then I was, of course, like on the side, like studying about the Jewish roots of my faith. And I thought, well, I really want to invest myself in ways that help bring fruitfulness in the things that I love and the things that give me a sense of purpose. And that was, youth ministry and knowing Jesus from within his Jewish context. And that's when I came up with this idea for first century youth ministry, was in that season of rest and healing in my life. And I had written a book during that time as well that I was sending out to different publishers, and it wasn't first century youth ministry, it was another one. And they were all kind of coming back saying, hey, great content, but we already have things like this on our shelf. And one of those publishers was Mark Oestreicher. And I said, well, hey, I have this other idea about a book called First Century Youth Ministry. He's like, I'm intrigued. And so I wrote him a chapter, and he said, yes, this is awesome. Let's green light this. I published the book in 2019 with the Youth Cartel. My book was just recently bought by YM360. However, shortly after I published the book, the Lord connected me with a brother in Christ who was on a similar journey as me. And so we started doing a podcast together. We published some curriculum together. And now I work with another gentleman who we do the podcast together biweekly. I just finished the very first century youth ministry tour to Israel because I'm passionate about helping youth leaders have the same experience that I did, seeing Jesus from within his Jewish context. And so that's pretty much what my ministry is all about. I'm learning all the time because I wasn't raised in these types of things, but I'm hungry to know more because it helps illuminate my faith. And it's really awesome when I'm teaching these things to teenagers. In fact, I was just taking a kid home from youth group last night. She's like, I'm so glad to be back in your Sunday school class because she's been teaching the little kids all summer. She's like, it's fine. But I already know all these stories. And I really like what you teach, how you teach all the historical content and the cultural stuff. I just love it. And, teenagers are hungry for that kind of thing. And so that's my passion. And that's why I founded First Century Youth Ministry, because I want people who are just like me, growing up in the church, kind of steeped in westernized Christian thinking, to have this experience with Jesus that will rock their faith and make it all the more awesome. And I just loved it when I took people with me to Israel, and they came back and they said, wow, this was transformational. Everybody has to go on a trip like this to walk the land as if you were a disciple following a rabbi. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're on a path of unlocking a lot of the biblical heritage that is there that gets neglected a lot of times in the church.
Sure.
It's like so much of Christianity doesn't connect with the things that are uh, part of Jewish history. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that we see is a continuity between that Jewish history and salvation history, and they're
Yeah.
really connected.
Yes.
And that it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what
It's
you're
all
doing.
connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember sitting, probably one of the wow moments for me in Israel was when we had a faith lesson on Lazarus, the raising of Lazarus. And I remember our director, John, teaching us that in the Jewish mind, a person's soul hovered around their body for the first 3 days. And after the third day, it departed and left that person's body, because they believe that on days 1, 2, and 3, that person could potentially come back to life. And so Jesus shows up on the fourth day in the raising of Lazarus. And I just was like, oh my gosh, like, what? Nobody ever shared these. And there's just, I mean, these little nuggets all over the scriptures once you start to understand what the Jewish people were thinking at that time. And so, oh man, I just love it. And I'm always learning. And I don't know, but I know you guys love it too. But it's been such a fun thing for me to dive into, and to be able to teach to others.
Yeah.
How has this changed your faith and your journey? And when you go to church on Sunday morning, or have you converted and come over to Saturdays? But how does this change? How has this changed really, like how you approach your own faith journey, and how does that get imparted to the next generation in youth ministry work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think for me, once I got back from Israel, I never looked at the Bible the same again. I
Mm.
started studying it differently. I never just read it for face value. I always thought, bet there's something culturally or historically going on here. And so I found that a couple of my favorite resources. David Stern has, I think it's called the Jewish New Testament commentary. I use that a lot. And I also have an archaeological, historical, cultural backgrounds, archaeological study Bible
Yeah.
that has really helped me. And then I use a lot of resources from First Fruits of Zion in my study time that has really helped me as I'm teaching these things to students and to other youth leaders, help them see kind of the thing behind the thing. Because there's always a thing behind the thing. It's not just usually, oh, Jesus was out doing that thing when he did that thing. It's like, well, why did he do it then? And why did he say it like he did? And who was there when he said it? And what Jewish thing was happening that would have, like, the Jewish people would have went, what the what? And so, yeah, I mean, I honestly, I can't even begin to even start to describe how it's changed my faith and how I study the Bible and how I teach it to others. But every time I teach these things to others, they go, wow, I never learned these things in Bible college or in seminary, but this is so cool and I want to know more.
Yeah. There's always a message that's behind the message that gets
Mm-hmm.
overlooked, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like that's what you are discovering and finding out and putting out there for others to consider.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So what is this like, and what's the reception been when it comes to teaching youth? And I think it's interesting because we can look at this in two ways. Number one, how do you just to get a teenager involved and to be thinking and be passionate about the word is a challenge in and of itself. But how does this change some of that for them. How receptive have you seen just this next generation in response to this kind of teaching?
Yeah. So I have, of course, you get a couple of kids who will kind of sit on the couch and want to rather look at their phone and things like that. But,
Yeah.
in my experience teaching these things to young people, they eat it up. I'm not kidding you. When I have not just the girl, in fact, one of the other girls before youth group, we're standing around one of my little seventh graders, and she says, "Are you going to be teaching? Are we going to have our Sunday school back again?" Because I've been combined high school and junior high for the summer, and we're splitting back with junior high, and that's the group that I normally teach. And she's like, "Oh, I can't wait. I love all those cultural, historical things that you teach all the time." And truthfully, I think and this is kind of one of my passions, is that I think what the youth ministry community, some, not all, have given to young people is Bible light. And they, for whatever reason, whether maybe because, for example, in my situation, I just didn't spend a lot of time studying the Bible. I spent more time thinking of fun games I could do or big outreach events that I could create. And a lot of my time wasn't invested in being a person of the text. But that's what a rabbi was. They were a person of the text who took disciples with them. And disciple, as we know, Talmud means pupil or learner. And so it was this understanding, this idea of discipleship was a teacher who who has learners who become teachers themselves, right? And so I think that young people are hungry for something deeper, because what's the big word running around today, right? Deconstructing my faith, right? And I think part of that is because they've never really been taught the Bible from within its ancient Near Eastern context. And so a lot of the things that young people read in the scriptures don't make any sense, which I could totally understand why they would feel that way if they've never been taught how the Jewish people thought at the time, or what was going on within the culture and how it's different from ours today. We just automatically think, oh, the Bible, let's just zoom it into 2023. Oh, well, now it doesn't make sense. Well, it wasn't meant to be understood with this cultural lens. It was meant to be understood with that cultural lens. And so, for me in teaching these things to kids, I think it's only helped them see just how greater God is and how more trustworthy that their faith is when they're taught the Bible from within its cultural and historical context. So in my opinion, kids are hungry for this kind of teaching, and they want that. And, as much as maybe the fun games are fun and all that kind of thing, they want a relationship with God, and they want a relationship with others in studying scripture. And, I think Abraham Joshua Heschel said it, that they don't remember so much. I'm going to butcher this quote, something like they don't remember so much the teacher, but the personality of the teacher. So if you're a person who teaches with passion and about the word, and a person who loves God and who loves to study his word and teaches it with that type of radical passion, then kids are going to notice that. And they're going to say, that Sunday school teacher I had, she was a little bit wacky, but man, she loved the Bible. And she taught it in ways that made me want to know more, right? Isn't that the point of teaching it in a way that
let me hold on. I'm just going to wind him up real quick. I see it building. Okay. Let me wind him up and go. There you go.
I'm just thinking as you are explaining this and this, direction that you're taking it, it's like you're laying a foundation for these young people to connect with the original intent and the lives of the people as they live then. It's like, it's like if you don't do that, it's like as if you have a roof with no foundation under it, and you're laying a foundation for them, so they have the whole house and the whole picture. It's great.
Yeah,
well, I love.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly what you guys are doing too. So we're just tag teaming it for Jesus. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're doing with youth, and obviously, we want to reach that next generation. In many ways too, as we're reaching out, and we have an older community, an older crowd. What's always amazing to us is to talk to 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds, and
Mm.
we'll go through a Passover Seder, we'll speak at their church, and they come up to us afterwards and they will say, I can't believe I've been a Christian my entire
Right.
life and I've never heard this before. Where has this
Mm-hmm.
happened? So what you're really trying to do, you want to reach the youth, and you can do that directly as you're speaking to them. But this is something that is not taught in the seminaries, right? This is not
Sure.
taught in most churches. There's some who are doing it really well and killing it, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you reach those youth leaders who maybe have been through seminary, maybe they haven't, but if we're going to reach the kids, then we really have to have a further reach. So what do you try to do through First Century Youth Ministry to inspire that next generation of youth leaders to be able to
Yeah, I
share
mean,
and
that's our
look
target.
at the
Our
context?
target, yeah, our target is youth leaders. And essentially, what I've tried to do over this past couple of years is share the content, build relationships with people through our Facebook community, through the podcast. And, I've had people reach out to me on occasion as well through email and just say thanks for what you're doing.
Mm,
But truthfully, as with anything, everything has to kind of start and then grow. And my ministry is very much in those beginning stages. Our first trip to Israel was awesome. I took, I think, 5 or 6 youth leaders, and then a number of others joined us on the trip. So my hope is that as word spreads among those who are connected to the podcast, those who are reading the book, who are getting plugged in with the curriculum and the resources that we're creating, they're going to catch the fire, right? Some people are going to look at this stuff and go, I don't get it. I don't want it. It's not for me, right? Which is unfortunate. But there are going to be others who are going to see this content and go, whoa, wait a second. Now that makes sense. Wait, I want to know more. And that's my hope with the podcast, is that's kind of our front door for people to enter into that conversation with us of knowing Jesus from within a Jewish context, and then joining the Facebook group, and then connecting with one of our cohorts. We've run a number of cohorts and been able to get to know people and build relationships. And one of the people who was a part of our podcast listening community, and then one of our cohorts actually joined us in Israel this summer. And so it's been really fun to see
mm.
that progression. And so my hope is that as I target youth leaders through these certain areas, that I'll continue to build connections and network with others, as others kind of, as you know this, right? Word of mouth is kind of the best way to for things to spread. So my hope is that word of mouth is going to help us continue to reach people and continue to help them grow. Because my ministry is not trying to make money off of people. We just want to help people grow, and we want to help them become better at what they do, and become more equipped at making disciples.
That's great.
Yeah.
Heather, we know that you have the book, First Century Youth Ministry. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. But if people want to connect with you, your podcast, if they want to get your book, where are all of the places that they can go to get connected?
Sure. Yeah, so we are pretty much on every major podcasting platform. You can find us. First Century Youth Ministry is the name of our podcast. Our podcast also plays on I Will Gather You radio on Saturdays, and I believe Sunday evenings as well. And then you can go to firstcenturyyouthministry.com. We've actually got a brand new resource we just released called A Youth Leader's Guide to Making Sense of the Apocrypha. We just finished a series on our podcast on the intertestamental period and the life of Herod the Great. That was a really fun one. And so we're trying to connect with people through the sharing of that resource, and help them understand kind of that intertestamental literature that showed up during that time. And then, of course, the Facebook community. I have a open Facebook page, and then I have a closed group as well that I like to post things on and try to get to know people through. That's just called First Century Youth Ministry. Those are kind of the best ways to connect with us. People can find my book in the YM360 store or on Amazon, or on our website, and I can send you a personalized signed copy in that way as well. But yeah, just hoping to make some friends and get to know people and help them in their journey.
I love it. Well, thank you, Heather, for coming on. Thank you for the good work that you're doing. You would be a star Talmudim of what we're trying to produce, and the people who are, we want to see believers who are taking in not just Act 2, the New Testament, but we are bridging it and we're telling the entire story. It's really hard to live a full faith knowing only half the story. And we believe that that's why Jesus came, and that's really why we're all in the same, we're building the same disciples and trying to build the same kingdom followers. So thank you for your work. It's so good to have you here, and check out all the places that you can find Heather, and we'll be putting all of those links in the show notes. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, and thank you guys for what you're doing. I really appreciate the opportunity today.
Bless you.